At my sister's engagement party, my dad proudly told her billionaire in-laws, Alicia delivers meal kit boxes in a truck. Everyone glanced at my bargain rack dress and laughed. Then the doors slammed open. Federal agents rushed in, armed and yelling. The U.S. Secretary of State walked straight toward me saying, "There's a specific kind of peace that comes with cleaning a weapon. It's mechanical. It's logical. It makes sense in a way my family never has." I, Emma Cooper, 41 years old, was sitting at my kitchen island. The smell of Hoppa's No. 9 solvent filled the air, a scent that to me smells like discipline. To my mother? Probably violence. My Sig Sauer P229 was disassembled on the cleaning mat in front of me. This isn't just a gun. It's the standard issue sidearm for the Diplomatic Security Service. It's an extension of my hand. I just wiped down the recoil spring when my phone buzzed, vibrating aggressively against the granite countertop. I didn't need to look. The rhythm of the vibration felt demanding. Was K. I wiped the oil from my fingers with a microfiber cloth before tapping the green icon. Emma. Finally. Kay's voice chirped, shrill and tinny through the speaker. She filled the screen of my iPhone, already looking like she was ready for a photo shoot. Her hair was blown out to perfection, a $60 salon job. She wore a Tory Burch silk blouse that probably cost more than my parents' monthly grocery budget. Behind her, the pristine beige living room of her condo. Everything curated. Everything fake. "Hello, Kay," I said, my voice flat. I glanced down at my own attire, a faded flannel shirt and worn-in Levi's. "You're not doing that mechanic stuff again, are you?" Kay squinted at the screen, noticing a black smudge of gun oil on my thumb. "Ugh, never mind. Look, I don't have much time. Nail appointment in 20. Just needed to go over the protocol for tomorrow night." Protocol. That was a word I used for motorcades and extraction points. Kay used it for seating charts and appetizers. "I know the time, Kay. 7. Chevy Chase," I said, reaching for the slide of my pistol to inspect the barrel. "Right. But listen." She leaned closer to the camera, her voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper she used when she was about to say something insulting disguised as advice. "I was thinking about what you should wear. Do you still have that navy blue dress? The jersey knit one? The one you wore to Aunt Linda's funeral 3 years ago?" I paused. I knew exactly which dress she meant. Shapeless. Cheap polyester. Slightly faded. Something I'd bought on a clearance rack because I hadn't had time to shop between missions in Kabul and DC. It made me look 10 years older and 20 pounds heavier. "I have it," I said. "But I was planning to wear the black suit." "No suits, God, Emma," she cut me off sharply. "You always look so masculine in those suits. It's an engagement party, not a job interview at a warehouse. Plus, the Prestons are very old school, very elegant. I don't want you to look like you're trying too hard. The blue dress is better. Is humble. It suits your situation." My situation. I picked up a cotton swab and began cleaning the firing pin channel. "Understood," I said. "The blue dress. Humble. Great." She smiled, a flash of whitened teeth. "Oh, and the truck. The monster." She was referring to my Ford F-150. To her, it was a redneck eyesore. To me, a modified, up-armored beast with a V8 engine capable of ramming through a blockade if necessary. Government property disguised as a civilian work truck. What about it? "Don't park in the driveway," Kay said, waving her hand dismissively. "And honestly, don't even park in front of the house. The HOA in the Prestons neighborhood is a nightmare. And if they see that thing with the mud flaps and the dents, it just lowers the property value just by idling there. Park it around the corner, maybe 2 blocks down. The walk will be good for you." I felt a muscle in my jaw tighten. She was banishing my vehicle, my mobile command center, to the shadows because it didn't fit her aesthetic. "I can park down the street," I said. My voice remained steady. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." I would not yell. I would not argue. I would endure. Perfect. She checked her watch, a delicate Cartier tank our parents had bought her for passing the bar exam. They gave me a pat on the back when I graduated from the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. "One last thing, Emma, and this is important." She looked me dead in the eye through the screen. The smile vanished. "When people ask, and they will ask because they're polite, about what you do," she paused, sighing as if my existence was a heavy burden she had to carry. "Just keep it vague. Say you work in logistics support or that you help manage deliveries. Do not launch into stories about driving long haul or whatever it is you do with those boxes. Gerald's father is a senator, Emma. I don't want to be embarrassed by blue-collar talk." "Logistics," I repeated. "And deliveries." "Exactly. Keep it short, smile, eat the hors d'oeuvres, and try to blend into the wallpaper." "Okay, I have to run. Love you." The screen went black before I could say goodbye. I sat there in the silence of my kitchen. "Love you" echoed in the empty room, sounding as hollow as a spent shell casing. Slowly, methodically, I began to reassemble the Sig Sauer. Slide. Spring. Guide rod. Frame. Click. Snap. The weapon was whole again, cold, heavy, and ready. I stood up and walked over to the wall near the pantry. It was a dark corner, shadowed by the refrigerator. Hanging there, slightly crooked, was a wooden plaque with a brass plate. U.S. Department of State Diplomatic Security Service Award for Valor. Presented to Special Agent Emma Cooper for courage under fire during the Benghazi evacuation. It was dusty. I hadn't looked at it in months. My parents had never looked at it. Not once. When they visited, my mother had actually hung a calendar over it because she said the government seal looked too aggressive. I reached out and straightened the frame. Kay wanted me to be small. She wanted the sister who drove a beat-up truck and wore cheap polyester. She needed that version of me. If I was the failure, then she was the success. If I was the dark, she was the light. It was the only dynamic my family understood. I could have told her right then on the phone. I could have told her that logistics meant coordinating the movement of nuclear assets. I could have told her that the boxes I delivered sometimes contained classified intelligence that kept the country from going to war. But I didn't. Because that wasn't the role they assigned me in the Cooper family script. Fine, Kay, I whispered to the empty room, turning off the lights. I'll wear the faded dress. I'll park in the dark. I will be your shadow. But shadows have a way of growing when the sun starts to set. There's a verse in the book of Mark 6:4 that I've recited to myself more times than I can count, lying awake in lonely hotel rooms halfway across the world. A prophet is not without honor, but in his own country and among his own kin and in his own house. I'm no prophet, I don't claim to be. But the sentiment holds a heavy, suffocating weight. It explains how I can be trusted with the life of a visiting prime minister on Monday and treated like a charity case by my mother on Tuesday. This misunderstanding didn't happen overnight. It wasn't one big lie that exploded. It was a slow, creeping erosion of the truth that started exactly 15 years ago. I remember the day clearly. It was a crisp Sunday in November. I had just driven back from Glencoe, Georgia, fresh out of the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. I was 26, exhausted, but buzzing with an electric kind of pride. I just earned my badge. I was officially a special agent with the Diplomatic Security Service. I walked into my parents' house, the same house in the suburbs with the manicured lawn and American flag by the porch, bursting with news. My father was in his sanctuary, the living room. Sunk deep into his leather recliner, a lukewarm beer on the coaster, eyes glued to the oversized television. Sunday night football was on. The Dallas Cowboys were down by 3, and the tension in the room was thicker than the cigar smoke clinging to the curtains. "Dad," I said, standing in front of the TV, blocking the view of the line of scrimmage. "I did it. I passed. I'm an agent." He leaned to the left, trying to see around my hip. "Move, Emma. They're in the red zone." "Dad, listen. I got the job. The State Department." He finally muted the TV, but he didn't look me in the eye. He looked at the remote in his hand. "State Department? That's government, right? Federal?" "Yes." I beamed, reaching into my pocket to pull out the leather wallet with the gold badge. "It's federal law enforcement. I'll be protecting—" "Does it have dental?" he interrupted, taking a sip of his beer. "And the pension? Is it the FERS system? You stick with that for 20 years, Emma, and you'll be set. Good benefits. Safe. Boring but safe." He didn't want to hear about the tactical driving course I'd aced. He didn't care about the firearms training or the courses on counterterrorism. To him, I had just landed a desk job at the DMV that happened to come with a good 401k. "It's not boring, Dad. It's dangerous. I'm an agent." I tried to correct him. From the kitchen, Kay walked in. She was 24 then, just starting law school, already perfecting that shark-like smile. She saw the badge in my hand and didn't even blink. "An agent." Kay laughed, popping a grape into her mouth. "Like 007? Please, Emma, you barely passed gym class in high school." "Daddy," she said, dismissing me with a wave of her hand as she sat on the arm of Dad's chair. "She's basically a security guard for the embassies, checking IDs, opening gates for the ambassadors like a glorified doorman." "I am not a doorman." I snapped. "I protect diplomats." "Right," Kay said, "you run errands for them. You make sure their dry cleaning is safe. It's logistics support staff." Dad unmuted the TV. The crowd roared. "Touchdown." "Well," Dad grunted, eyes back on the screen, "just make sure you sign up for the life insurance. Can't be too careful if you're driving around DC traffic." That was the moment the seed was planted. Over the next decade and a half, Kay watered that seed with envy and malicious precision. She couldn't stand the idea that her older sister might be doing something cool or heroic while she was buried in contract law paperwork. So, she became my translator to the family. When I was deployed to Kabul to secure the embassy perimeter, Kay told the aunts and uncles, "Emma is working overseas, some sort of government courier job. She delivers paperwork." When I was assigned to the Secretary of State's protective detail, traveling on Air Force 2, Kay told the neighbors, "She's in transportation now. She drives the vans for the government officials, shuttling them around." And eventually, as the game of telephone warped the truth, Driving the vans became driving a truck, and delivering sensitive documents became delivering packages. By the time I was 35, in my parents' minds, I was essentially a glorified Uber Eats driver with a government clearance. It wasn't just words, it was actions. 3 months ago, I came home to find an envelope in my mailbox. It was a card from my mother. I opened it, expecting maybe a birthday check or a family newsletter. Instead, a frantic flutter of paper scraps fell onto my kitchen floor. I knelt down to pick them up. They were coupons clipped from the Sunday newspaper. Subway, buy one 6-inch sub, get one free. Arby's, 2 classic roast beef sandwiches for $6. Jiffy Lube, $10 off your next oil change. There was a sticky note attached to the Jiffy Lube coupon in my mother's handwriting. Emma, honey, I know you put a lot of miles on that truck of yours and gas prices are so high right now. I thought these might help with lunch on the road. Don't be too proud to use them. Love, Mom. I stood there in my kitchen holding a coupon for a roast beef sandwich, while my tactical vest sat on the chair next to me. They didn't do it because they were evil. My parents aren't villains in a comic book. They're just average. They are terrified of anything they don't understand, and they are obsessed with appearances. The truth is their indifference hurts more than hate. Hate implies that I matter enough to provoke a reaction. Indifference tells me I am nothing but background noise. If you have ever felt like the black sheep because your family refuses to see your true worth, I need you to pause for a second. Hit that like button right now. It's a small signal to the world that we exist. And tell me in the comments below, I am not who they say I am. Let's confuse the algorithm with the truth. I looked at those coupons and I finally understood the ecosystem of the Cooper family. For Kay to be the golden child, the successful, wealthy, brilliant lawyer, she needed a contrast. She needed someone to be below her. If I were a high-ranking federal agent protecting world leaders, I would be her equal. Or worse, I might overshadow her. My parents couldn't handle that. They needed the narrative to be simple. Kay is the success. Emma is the struggle. That order kept them safe. That order kept them comfortable. They believe I am a failure, I said to the empty air of my apartment, crumpling the Arby's coupon in my fist. Because believing I am a failure makes them feel successful. So I let them believe it. I let them have their comfort. I let them have their small, tidy little lies. But tomorrow, I whispered, looking out into the darkening city, the lies were going to collide with my reality. Because while they thought I was driving a delivery truck, I was preparing to command a motorcade that would shut down the entire Capital Beltway. And God help anyone who stood in my way. At 0500 hours, the tarmac at Dulles International Airport is a desolate, windswept expanse of gray concrete. The air smells of burnt jet fuel and freezing rain. It's a smell that triggers a specific physiological response in me. My heart rate slows down, my pupils dilate, and the world narrows into a grid of potential threats. I stood by the rear door of the armored SUV, my delivery truck, as my family calls it. But this morning it wasn't carrying boxes. It was part of a 3-vehicle convoy waiting to receive a high-value asset. A foreign witness, vital to a federal trafficking case, was stepping off a C-30 transport plane. Perimeter is tight, Cooper. The voice crackled in my earpiece. It was Martinez, one of the Marines from the embassy security detail. We have eyes on all exits. I tapped my comms. Copy that. Keep the engine running. We moved. The second feet hit the ground. The ramp of the aircraft lowered with a mechanical whine. A gust of wind whipped my short hair across my face, but I didn't flinch. 6 Marines in full combat gear flanked the witness. They moved with a synchronized, lethal grace that you only see in men who have trusted each other with their lives. As they approached my vehicle, the lead Marine, a sergeant major with a jaw like granite, stopped in front of me. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He gave me a sharp, respectful nod, a recognition of rank and capability. All yours, ma'am, he said, his voice cutting through the roar of the engines. Safe travels. Thank you, Sergeant. We'll take it from here. We loaded the witness. The door slammed shut with the heavy, reassuring thud of bulletproof steel. Jerry, my RSO regional security officer, slapped the hood of the truck twice. He walked up to my window as I shifted the heavy vehicle into gear. Jerry is a man of few words. A Vietnam vet who has seen more combat than most action movie stars. Good work, Cooper, Jerry said, his eyes scanning the horizon one last time. That was a textbook extraction. You're the iron shield of this unit. I don't know what we'd do without you. The iron shield. I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the car heater. Respect. Competence. Purpose. In this world, on this tarmac, I was essential. I was powerful. I guided the convoy out of the secure zone, watching the sunrise bleed orange over the Virginia skyline. My job was done. The adrenaline began to recede, leaving behind the dull ache in my lower back that comes from wearing a 20-pound tactical vest for 6 hours. I pulled into a lobby to strip off the vest and secure my weapon in the lockbox. That was when my personal phone buzzed on the passenger seat. The screen lit up. Mom. I stared at it. The contrast was jarring. 1 minute I was Cooper, the Iron Shield. The next I was Emma the daughter. I unlocked the phone. Emma, honey, are you on your way back from your night shift? Since you have the big truck, can you stop by Costco? We need drinks for Kay's party tonight. 5 cases of La Croix pamplemousse flavor and maybe 5 cases of Diet Coke. The 36-pack ones. It saves us the delivery fee and your truck has plenty of room. Thanks. I read the message twice. My truck. This vehicle has run flat tires, reinforced plating capable of stopping a 7.62mm round, and an encrypted satellite communication system. And my mother saw it as a grocery cart. She didn't ask if I was tired. She didn't ask if I was safe. She just saw a big truck and free labor. I looked at the dashboard. I could say no. I could tell her I had a debriefing. I could tell her the truth, that this is a government vehicle and I shouldn't be hauling soda for a suburban engagement party. But I didn't. Because the conditioning runs deep. Because fighting them takes more energy than just doing the damn task. Copy that, I whispered to no one, putting the truck in drive. 40 minutes later, I was in the purgatory known as the Costco parking lot. I maneuvered the massive black SUV into a spot between a minivan covered in stick-figure family decals and a sedan with a student driver bumper sticker. I stepped out, still wearing my tactical pants and heavy boots, though I had swapped my tactical shirt for the flannel one. People stared. I looked like I was ready to invade the rotisserie chicken aisle. Walking through the warehouse was a surreal experience. An hour ago I was scanning for snipers. Now I was scanning for the best price on sparkling water. I wrestled 5 cases of La Croix and 5 cases of Diet Coke onto a flatbed cart. They were heavy, awkward. The physical exertion was nothing compared to training, but the mental weight was crushing. I paid with my own card. Mom always forgot to transfer the money until weeks later, and hauled the load back to the truck. By the time I pulled up to Kay's condo complex, the sun was high and bright. It was a nice place. Gated. Manicured hedges. The kind of place where people called the police if a car was parked on the street for too long. I backed into the driveway and texted Kay, "I'm here." The front door opened. Kay stood there wrapped in a silk robe, holding her hands up in the air like a surgeon scrubbing in for an operation. "Oh, thank God," she called out, not stepping a foot outside. "I just put on my second coat of polish. Ballet slippers pink. I literally can't touch anything for 20 minutes. I got out of the truck. The heat radiating off the asphalt hit me. "Where do you want these?" I asked, grabbing the first 2 cases of soda. My biceps strained against the flannel. "Just bring them into the living room," she directed, waving a wet fingernail toward the open door. "Stack them in the corner by the bar cart, but be careful." I walked past her, carrying 50 pounds of carbonated water. I smelled the chemical tang of acetone and expensive perfume. It replaced the smell of jet fuel in my nose. "Careful." Kay shrieked as I stepped onto the entryway. "I just had the hardwood floors refinished last week. Do not drag those boxes, Emma. Lift them. If you scratch the oak, Gerald will have a heart attack." I stopped in the middle of her living room. My boots that had kicked down doors in training simulations, squeaked slightly on the pristine polished wood. Sweat trickled down my spine. "I've got it, Kay," I grunted, lowering the boxes slowly. "Make sure they're straight," she added, leaning against the doorframe, blowing on her nails. "And try not to track any dirt in. Your boots look dusty. Did you come from a construction site or something?" I looked up at her. "The airport," I said quietly. "Ugh, the airport. So, Emma, you should probably wash your hands before you touch any of the food prep stuff." Later I set the last case of Diet Coke down. Clunk. "I'm the Iron Shield," I thought to myself, the words sounding bitter and distant now. Here in this house I wasn't a shield. I wasn't an agent. I was a mule. A mule with dirty boots who needed to be careful not to scratch the precious floor of the Golden Child. I stood up, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Is that all?" I asked. "For now." Kay smiled, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "She doesn't like the corporate grind like we do. She prefers the open road. No bosses, no deadlines, no structure. Just her and the boxes. No structure." I almost laughed. My life was defined by the strictest structure on the planet. Chain of command, rules of engagement, federal law. "Is that so?" Patricia asked, tilting her head. A small, pitying smile played on her lips. "I suppose that must be freeing. Not everyone is cut out for ambition. I suppose some people are just happier living simply." "Exactly," Kay said, squeezing Gerald's arm. "Emma is all about the simple life." I stood there, surrounded by millionaires, holding a glass of water, listening to them rewrite my life into a tragedy of wasted potential. "Well," Gerald said, clapping his hands together, "the world needs people to move things around, doesn't it? Essential services and all that." "Indeed," Patricia murmured, turning her attention back to a waiter passing with a tray of caviar blinis. "Someone has to do it." They turned away from me, the conversation effectively over. I'd been assessed, categorized as the help, and dismissed. I stood alone in the middle of the room, clutching my purse against the cheap polyester of my dress. My gun, usually a comforting weight against my ribs, was miles away in the lockbox of my truck. I felt naked without it. But the night wasn't over. The crowd was growing and Kay's friends, the sharks in suits, were starting to circle. I could feel their eyes on me, sensing the weakness, smelling the blood in the water. The circle formed around me before I could escape. It was a predatory formation, one I had seen wolves use in nature documentaries. But here, the predators were wearing Brooks Brothers suits and holding tumblers of single malt scotch. These were Kay's friends, the DC up-and-comers. Corporate lawyers, lobbyists, junior partners who measured their self-worth in billable hours and the horsepower of their leased BMWs. "So, you're the sister?" said a man who had introduced himself as Brad. He was leaning against a marble pillar, swirling the ice in his glass. He had the kind of face that had never known a day of hardship. Smooth, tanned, and smug. "Kay says you're in distribution." "Something like that," I said, gripping my glass of sparkling water. "I work in secure logistics." "Logistics," Brad repeated, chuckling as he glanced at his friends. "That's a fancy word for it. My cousin tells girls he's in petroleum transfer engineering when he pumps gas in New Jersey." The group erupted in laughter. It was a sharp, performative sound. "No, but seriously," another guy chimed in, loosening his tie. "It's the gig economy, right? Everyone is doing it. Freedom. Be your own boss." He didn't respect the hustle. His tone dripped with sarcasm. "I'm curious though," Brad continued, taking a step closer, invading my personal space. "When you're driving those trucks, do you get to keep the stuff that people don't pick up? Like, if someone orders a meal kit and isn't home, do you just take it? Must save a fortune on groceries." "Yeah." A woman in a red dress giggled. "Do you eat the leftovers? Is that a perk of the job?" My hand tightened around my glass, the crystal etched into my palm. I thought about the cargo I had transported that morning, a witness who had seen a cartel execution. If I had kept him, it would be kidnapping. "The cargo I transport is strictly monitored," I said, my voice low. "And it's not food." Sure, Brad winked. "Whatever you say." "Hey, does Uber Eats have a dental plan yet, or is that still just a dream?" More laughter. I felt the heat rising up my neck, not from shame but from a dark, simmering rage. I could dismantle Brad in 3 seconds. A strike to the solar plexus, a sweep of the leg. He would be on the floor gasping for air before his expensive scotch hit the rug. But I couldn't. I was in the blue polyester dress. I was Emma the failure. Actually, a voice boomed from behind me. It was my father. For a split second, a foolish, childish part of me thought he was coming to save me, to tell these entitled brats to back off, to say, "My daughter serves her country." I turned to look at him. He was holding a glass of red wine, his face flushed with the excitement of being near the elites. "She's just stubborn," my father said, shaking his head with a theatrical sigh. He looked at Brad, desperate for approval, desperate to be part of the joke. "We tried, didn't we, honey?" He gestured to my mother, who was hovering nearby. "We told her to go back to school, community college, get a nursing degree, something stable. But no, Emma likes to drive. She likes looking at the scenery." My stomach dropped. He wasn't saving me. He was selling me out. He was using my humiliation as currency to buy his way into their conversation. "Community college is a great option," the woman in red said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It's very accessible." "She wouldn't listen," my father continued, avoiding my eyes. "Always had to do things the hard way. That's Emma for you. A bit of a rough diamond." "Very rough," he muttered. "Dad," I said, the word coming out like a warning. "What?" He looked at me, feigning innocence. "I'm just telling them the truth. You could have been a paralegal, like Kay suggested. Air conditioning, a desk. But you prefer the open road." He made it sound like I was a hobo jumping on freight trains. "My work requires a level of focus and judgment that most people wouldn't understand," I said, looking directly at Brad. My voice was steady, cutting through the laughter like a knife. "One mistake in my line of work doesn't result in a paperwork error. It results in catastrophe." The circle went quiet for a beat. My tone had shifted. The delivery girl had just spoken with the authority of a field commander. Brad blinked, looking unsure for a moment, but the tension was broken by a heavy hand landing on my shoulder. It was Gerald Whitley, the patriarch. He squeezed my shoulder, not affectionately but with the weight of ownership. He smiled down at me, his eyes crinkling with what looked like kindness but felt like pity. Now, Gerald boomed, his voice rich and baritone, silencing the group. "Let's not give Emma a hard time." He looked around the circle, playing the role of the benevolent king defending his peasant. "Society needs people like Emma," Gerald said, giving my shoulder another patronizing pat. "Think about it. Without people willing to do the heavy lifting, the driving, the serving, how would we function? We wouldn't have our packages. We wouldn't have our dinners delivered warm." He looked at me, his eyes locking onto mine. "It is a noble service, my dear," he said, speaking slowly, enunciating every word as if I were a child or mentally slow. "Knowing your place in the ecosystem is a virtue. Not everyone is meant to lead. Not everyone is meant to create policy or build empires. Some people are the hands and feet. And we thank you for that. Really, it's a worthy contribution. The room seemed to tilt. Knowing your place. He wasn't defending me. He was defining me. He was putting me in a box, a small, labeled box at the bottom of his pyramid. To him, I was the biological equivalent of a forklift. Useful. Necessary. But not sentient. Not equal. Thank you, Gerald, I said. My voice sounded hollow to my own ears. I'm glad I can serve. That's the spirit. Gerald laughed, releasing my shoulder. Now who needs a refill? I opened a 1998 Bordeaux that is breathing beautifully. The circle broke. They turned their backs on me, drawn away by the promise of expensive wine, leaving me standing alone in the center of the rug. I stared at their backs. The tailored suits, the silk dresses, the confident posture of people who have never had to check under their car for an IED. My phone, tucked into the small clutch purse I was holding, began to vibrate against my palm. It was a long, sustained vibration. Not a text. A call. I looked down at the screen. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't Kay. The screen flashed red. Incoming secure call. Central Command. I took a deep breath. The air in the room suddenly felt thin and stale. The humiliation that had been burning my skin seconds ago evaporated, replaced by the icy clarity of duty. The delivery girl was about to clock out. The agent was clocking in. The phone in my hand felt radioactive. The screen pulsed red. A silent siren in the middle of the polite, murmuring crowd. Incoming secure call. Central Command. I didn't answer it immediately. Protocol dictated I move to a secure perimeter. I turned on my heel, ignoring the confused look from the waiter holding a tray of empty champagne flutes, and stepped quickly into the hallway. The heavy oak doors muffled the sound of the jazz band, but the silence out here was deafening. I swiped the screen. Cooper, I said. My voice had dropped an octave. The submissive sister was gone. Code red Cooper. I repeat, code red. It was Jerry. His voice was tight, clipped, fighting against a background of chaotic radio chatter. We have a situation. The secretary's motorcade has been boxed in on Rockville Pike, 2 miles south of your location. Local PD is overwhelmed. We have a credible threat of an ambush. The lead vehicle is disabled. My blood ran cold. Rockville Pike at this hour? It was a parking lot of commuters. A sitting duck scenario. Secretary Thomas, the man who held the nuclear codes for diplomatic relations, was trapped in a metal box surrounded by potential hostiles. Status of the asset? I asked, my eyes scanning the hallway for cameras. Asset is secure for now, but exposure is high. We need an extraction route and immediate fire support. You are the closest unit. What is your ETA? I looked down at my watch, then at my blue polyester dress, then at my scuffed shoes. I have the beast, I said, referring to my up-armored truck. I can be there in 4 minutes if I jump the median. Do it. Jerry barked. Get him out of there, Emma. Bring him to the safe house. You are authorized to use lethal force. Go. The line went dead. 4 minutes. I shoved the phone back into my clutch. My heart was hammering against my ribs. A steady rhythmic thud. Thump, 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 thump. It wasn't fear. It was fuel. I needed to leave. No. I turned back toward the main party room. The quickest way to the front door was through the crowd. I didn't have time to skirt around the service entrance. I pushed open the double doors. The room had quieted down. Gerald Whitley was standing by the fireplace, tapping a spoon against his crystal glass. Clink, clink, clink. He was preparing to make a toast. The guests were freezing in place, turning their attention to the patriarch. I moved. I didn't walk. I cut through the room with a stride that was too long, too purposeful for a party guest. I wasn't weaving through people. I was calculating trajectories. Excuse me, I muttered, brushing past Kay's friend Brad, nearly knocking the scotch out of his hand. He glared at me, but I was already gone. I made it to the edge of the foyer, 10 feet from the heavy front door, 10 feet from freedom, 10 feet from the mission. And then she stepped in front of me. My mother. She materialized from the crowd like a blockade. In her right hand, she held a large silver cake knife. It was ornate, with a pearl handle glinting under the crystal chandelier. Behind her, a waiter was wheeling out a 5-tier cake covered in white fondant and sugar flowers. Emma, she whispered, her voice hissed through clenched teeth. She blocked my path physically. Where do you think you're going? Gerald is about to speak. I have to leave, Mom, I said. I didn't stop moving until I was inches from her face. Right now. Emergency. She didn't step aside. Instead, she raised the knife slightly. Not as a weapon, but as a pointer, gesturing indignantly at the room. Emergency? She scoffed. Her eyes darted around to see if anyone was watching us. What kind of emergency, Emma? Did someone order a salad and forget the dressing? Did a box fall off the truck? Mom, move, I said. My tone was icy. It was the voice I used to order civilians to get down during a raid. But she wasn't a civilian. She was my mother, and she was immune to my authority. You are not ruining this, she said, her voice rising. Kay has worked for months on this night. We are about to cut the cake. It's tradition. You cannot leave before the cake is cut. It's social suicide. I don't care about the cake, I said, my patience snapping like a dry twig. I have to go. She stared at me, her face twisting into a mask of incredulity. She looked at my cheap dress, my desperate expression, and then she laughed. A short, cruel sound. You can't wait 10 minutes? She asked loudly. Heads began to turn. Gerald stopped tapping his glass. The room fell into an awkward silence. Is the customer that important? Are they starving? Is the world going to end if someone doesn't get their meal kit on time? I looked at her. I looked at the silver knife in her hand. It was a tool for celebration, for sweetness, and she was using it to cut me open. I thought about telling her. I thought about screaming, I'm going to save the Secretary of State from an assassination attempt. But I looked at their faces. Gerald's annoyed frown, Kay's mortified glare, the guests' amused smirks. They wouldn't believe me. They didn't want to believe me. They wanted the delivery driver. They wanted the failure. So I gave them what they wanted. I looked my mother dead in the eye. My face went blank. The mask of the ghost slid into place. Yes, Mom, I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. The customer is very hungry. And they get very angry when I'm late. My mother's jaw dropped slightly. She looked validated yet disgusted. Go then, she sneered, stepping aside and waving the knife toward the door as if banishing a stray dog. Go to your job. Don't expect us to save you a piece. I didn't look back. I walked past her. I walked past the cake. I walked past Gerald, who was shaking his head in theatrical disappointment. As I pushed open the heavy front door, stepping out into the cool night air, I heard my mother's voice one last time. She wasn't whispering anymore. She was apologizing to the nearby guests, ensuring her social standing remained intact. I'm so sorry, everyone, she said, her voice dripping with fake sorrow. Emma, well, she's always had a problem with priorities. It's a lack of education, really. Just very unmannered. Unmannered. The door clicked shut behind me, severing the connection. The silence of the driveway hit me. The cool air filled my lungs. I didn't run to the truck. I sprinted. My heels dug into the gravel, but I didn't care. I reached the Ford F-150, my beast, and ripped the door open. I vaulted into the driver's seat. If you have ever had to walk away from people who claim to love you, just to save yourself or to do what you knew was right, I need you to pause and hit that like button right now. Do it for the boundaries we have to set. And tell me in the comments, I choose my mission. Let's show the world that walking away takes more strength than staying. I slammed the door shut, sealing myself inside the armored cocoon. The smell of leather and gun oil replaced the scent of expensive perfume. I punched the ignition. The V8 engine roared to life. A deep, guttural growl that shook the frame. It was the sound of power. I reached under the seat and pulled out my tactical vest. I threw it over my head, pulling the Velcro straps tight over the blue polyester dress. I didn't bother with the shoes. I kicked them off, pressing my bare foot against the gas pedal. I keyed the radio mic. Central, this is Agent Cooper, I said, my voice steady as a rock. I am mobile. ETA 3 minutes. Tell the secretary to keep his head down. The cavalry is coming. I shifted the truck into gear and peeled out of the Whitley estate, leaving tire marks on their perfect asphalt. The party was over. The war had begun. Rockville Pike is a nightmare on a good day. Tonight it was a parking lot. Red brake lights stretched as far as the eye could see. A river of stalled steel winding through the heart of Bethesda. But I wasn't a commuter anymore. I was a weapon. I flipped the toggle switch on the dashboard of my Ford F-150. Hidden strobe lights behind the grille and windshield erupted in a blinding display of red and blue. I hit the siren. A low, guttural whoop-whoop that vibrated in my chest. People didn't just move, they scattered. The sight of a matte black lifted truck with government plates parting traffic like the Red Sea tends to trigger a primal instinct in suburban drivers. Inside the cab, the transformation was happening. I engaged the cruise control for 3 seconds. A dangerous maneuver at 40 miles per hour, just long enough to rip the Velcro straps of my tactical vest. I hauled a heavy Kevlar over my head. It settled onto my shoulders with a comforting weight. It covered the cheap blue polyester dress, hiding the failure underneath layers of ballistic protection. I kicked off my right pump, then the left. I drove barefoot for a quarter mile, weaving through the breakdown lane, before jamming my feet into the tactical boots I kept wedged under the heater. I didn't have time to lace them fully, so I tucked the laces in. Earpiece in, radio on. Central, I am 1 minute out. I barked into the comms. Give me a sit rep. 2 hostiles and a sedan cut off the motorcade. Jerry's voice came through, clear and tense. Exchange of fire. Limo is disabled, engine block hit. Suspects fled, but we anticipate a secondary attack. Local PD is on scene, but the perimeter is porous. I saw the smoke rising ahead. The intersection near the Naval Medical Center was chaos. A black limousine sat sideways across 2 lanes, steam pouring from its hood. 2 Secret Service SUVs were boxed in around it, forming a defensive wedge. Montgomery County police cruisers were everywhere, their lights flashing, but there was no order. Officers were shouting, pushing back civilians who were filming with their phones. It was a circus. I didn't slow down until the last second. I drove my truck up over the concrete median, shredding the landscaped grass, and slammed the brakes right next to the lead police cruiser. I kicked the door open. A young MCPD officer, adrenaline high, hand on his holster, stepped toward me. "Ma'am, get back in the vehicle. This is a crime scene," he yelled, seeing a woman in a flannel shirt and unlaced boots jumping out of a truck. I didn't stop walking. I reached to my belt, not for a weapon but for the leather wallet clipped to my waist. I flipped it open. The gold badge of the Diplomatic Security Service caught the strobe lights. "Federal agent." I shouted, my voice cutting through the siren noise. "Stand down, officer." The cop froze. He saw the badge. He saw the vest. He saw the look in my eyes, a look that said I had authority over his entire existence right now. "I need a perimeter established at 100 yards. I ordered, pointing to the intersection. "Push those civilians back. If anyone crosses that line, you detain them. Do you understand?" "Yes. Yes, ma'am." He scrambled to obey, waving his arms at his partner. I moved past him, entering the kill box. The Secret Service agents recognized me immediately. Johnson, the lead on the secretary's detail, lowered his MP5 submachine gun slightly when he saw me. "Cooper," he yelled. "Good to see you. We're sitting ducks here." "I have the beast," I said, thumbing back toward my truck. "It's up armored. We extract him now. Get him to the safe house." I moved to the rear door of the damaged limousine. The window was spiderwebbed with impact cracks. Bulletproof glass that had done its job but barely. I tapped the glass 3 times the signal. The door clicked and pushed open. Secretary of State Thomas sat inside. He was a man of 60 with the weight of American diplomacy on his shoulders. He looked shaken, his tie loosened, holding a secure briefcase against his chest. When he looked up and saw me, his shoulders visibly dropped. The tension left his face. "Agent Cooper," he exhaled, a breathy laugh escaping him. "Thank God. When I heard local support was coming, I was worried. I didn't know it was you." "I was in the neighborhood, Mr. Secretary," I said calmly, extending a hand to help him out. "Let's get you out of this tin can." "I trust you," he said simply. He took my hand. "Think about that. The man who negotiates treaties with hostile nations, the man who advises the president, trusted me with his life. He didn't care about my dress. He didn't care about my bank account. He cared that I was the best." We moved quickly. I shielded his body with mine, guiding him toward my truck. The Marines and Secret Service formed a phalanx around us. I opened the passenger door of my truck. "Get in. Keep your head down. Floorboard is reinforced." As I slammed the door shut, ensuring the third most powerful man in the executive branch was safe, my phone, which I had thrown onto the dashboard, lit up. It was right there at eye level. The screen was bright against the dark interior. A text message from Kay. I shouldn't have looked, but in the split second before I climbed into the driver's seat, my eyes caught the preview. "Kay, you are a disgrace to this family. Mom is crying in the bathroom because of you. Don't bother coming back. We don't want you here." I stared at the words. Disgrace. Behind me, sirens wailed. Beside me, the Secretary of State was waiting for me to drive him to safety. Around me, federal agents were following my lead. And on that screen, I was a disgrace because I didn't stay to eat cake. The irony was so sharp, it felt like a physical blow. It was absurd. It was tragic. It was hilarious. "Agent Cooper," the secretary asked from the passenger seat, his voice low. "Is everything all right? We need to move." I looked at the phone one last time. I didn't delete the message. I wanted to keep it. I wanted to remember exactly what they thought of me while I was busy saving the world. I reached out and flipped the phone face down. "Everything is clear, Mr. Secretary," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "We are moving." I stomped on the gas. The truck surged forward, pushing through the debris, leaving the chaos behind. But we needed a place to go. The safe house in McLean was compromised by the traffic. The embassy was too far. I needed a secure location close by with high walls and gated access. Somewhere off the grid for 20 minutes until the backup team could arrive with the helicopter. I ran the mental map of Chevy Chase. There was only one place that fit the criteria. I gripped the steering wheel tight. Fate, it seemed, had a very twisted sense of humor tonight. "Central," I radioed in. "I am diverting to a temporary secure location. Mark my coordinates." I turned the wheel hard to the left. We were going back to the party. "Mr. Secretary," I said, keeping my eyes on the rearview mirror where the smoke from his disabled limousine was still rising into the night sky. "We can't wait here on the shoulder. The extraction team is 10 minutes out, and this position is compromised. We need hard cover now." Secretary Thomas looked out the window at the gridlock traffic of Rockville Pike. He was calm, but I saw his hand tightening on the handle of a secure briefcase. Where do you suggest, Agent Cooper? My sister's-in-law's, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The Whitley estate. It's 3 minutes from here. High brick walls, gated access, minimal sight lines from the street. It's the only viable safe house in this sector. He looked at me, then at my tactical vest, then at the determined set of my jaw. Do it, he said. I spun the steering wheel hard to the left. The Ford F-150's tires screeched as I jumped the curb, bypassing a stalled intersection. 3 minutes later, I was barreling down the tree-lined streets of Chevy Chase again. I didn't slow down for the gate this time. It was open. Guests were leaving early, likely due to the disturbance I had caused earlier. I drove the massive truck right up the center of the driveway, ignoring the frantic waves of the valet staff. I slammed on the brakes directly in front of the main entrance, parking diagonally across the steps. My truck blocked a Bentley and a Porsche, boxing them in. Stay here, I instructed the secretary. Keep your head down. Give me 30 seconds to clear the room and secure the perimeter. Copy that, he nodded. I unlocked the door and stepped out. The air was still cool, smelling of expensive cologne and exhaust fumes. I placed my hand on the grip of my Sig Sauer P229, now openly holstered on my hip, and marched up the stairs. I didn't knock. I placed my boot against the heavy oak door and shoved it open. It swung inward with a heavy thud, crashing against the interior wall. The sound silenced the room instantly. The party had thinned out, but the core group was still there. Gerald, Patricia, Kay, my parents, and about 20 close friends were gathered in the foyer, nursing their drinks and dissecting the drama of my earlier exit. When I stepped into the light, I looked like an alien invasion. I was barefoot in tactical boots, wearing a Kevlar vest over a blue polyester dress, with a radio coil running up my neck and a federal firearm on my hip. But they didn't see an agent. They didn't see the gun. They were so blinded by their own narrative that they only saw the delivery girl who had ruined their night. Kay was the first to react. She broke away from a group of bridesmaids, her face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. You, she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at me. You have the audacity to come back here after the scene you caused? She marched toward me, stopping only because I held up a hand in a halt gesture. Kay, step back, I said, my voice projecting with command authority. I need everyone to clear this room immediately. This is a matter of national security. National security? Kay laughed. A high-pitched, hysterical sound. Oh my God, you are delusional. What? Did you forget your cooler? Did you forget a receipt for the soda? I am not joking, I said, scanning the upper landing for threats. Clear the room. Get out. Gerald. Whitley roared. The patriarch stepped forward, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. He looked at my muddy boots on his Persian rug. He looked at the truck blocking his driveway. He was trembling with fury. This is private property, Miss Cooper, Gerald bellowed. You are trespassing. I don't care what kind of costume you are wearing or what game you are playing. You have insulted my wife. You have upset the bride. And now you are barging in here like a lunatic. Mr. Whitley, I tried to interject. I am commandeering this location as a temporary. I am calling the police. Gerald interrupted, reaching for his phone. I am having you arrested. You clearly need mental help. Gerald, please? My mother's voice whined from the back. She pushed her way to the front, dragging my father with her. My parents looked at me with a mixture of horror and exhaustion. To them, this wasn't a tactical operation. This was their daughter having a mental breakdown in front of the most important people they knew. Emma, stop it, my mother pleaded, wringing her hands. Just go. Haven't you done enough damage? Why are you wearing that vest? You look ridiculous. I am working, Mom, I said through gritted teeth. Working? My father stepped forward. The shame in his eyes was palpable. He looked at Gerald, then at me, and decided he needed to distance himself from his failure of a daughter one last time. You are a disgrace, Emma, my father spat out. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Look at you barging into a respectable home shouting orders. For what? Did you lose your job? Are you here to beg for money because you got fired from the delivery route? Dad, listen to me. No, you listen, he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at my face. You make us look like fools. You make us look like trash. All of this drama. Just because you drive a truck. Just because you deliver lunchboxes for a living and you can't handle that your sister is a success. The room was deadly silent. The insult echoed off the marble floors. Just because you deliver lunchboxes. It was the trap of contempt. They had built a cage for me out of their own insecurities, and they refused to let me out of it, even when the keys were staring them in the face. I looked at my father. I looked at Kay, sneering in her silver dress. I looked at Gerald, dialing 911 on his phone. I felt a strange sense of calm. The bridge wasn't just burned. It was incinerated. I am not here for money, Dad, I said quietly. And I am not here for lunchboxes. I raised my hand to my earpiece. Asset is entering the structure, I said into the mic. What are you talking about? Kay snapped. Who are you talking to? You are insane. Before I could answer, the heavy front door behind me, which I had left ajar, swung open wide. Two massive Secret Service agents in dark suits stepped in, MP5 submachine guns held at the low ready. They scanned the room in a split second, their presence instantly changing the atmospheric pressure of the house. Kay gasped and took a step back. Gerald dropped his phone. And then, stepping through the phalanx of agents came the Secretary of State. He looked tired, disheveled, and smelled of smoke. But he was unmistakably Thomas J. Preston, the man whose face was on the news every night. He walked right up to me, ignoring everyone else in the room. Agent Cooper, the secretary said, his voice loud and clear in the stunned silence. Perimeter is secure. I looked at my father, whose mouth was hanging open. I looked at Kay, whose face had gone pale as a ghost. Perimeter is secure, Mr. Secretary, I said. Welcome to the safe house. The words hung in the air for exactly 1 second. Then the world turned inside out. The heavy oak front door didn't just open, it was breached. Two large men in dark, ill-fitting suits burst through the gap I had left. They moved with the terrifying speed of a tactical entry team. They didn't look like party guests. They looked like sledgehammers. Federal agents. Hands. Show us your hands. The shout was deafening, bouncing off the marble floors and high ceilings of the Whitley foyer. The lead agent, a man I knew as Johnson, swept the room with the muzzle of his MP5 submachine gun. He wasn't aiming at anyone specific, but the threat was universal. Make a hole. Clear the center. Johnson barked. Panic is a funny thing. It strips away the veneer of civilization instantly. The wealthy guests, CEOs, lawyers, socialites, didn't argue about property rights anymore. They scrambled. They dropped their crystal glasses. They backed up against the silk wallpapered walls, hands trembling in the air, terrified that this was a robbery or a raid. Gerald Whitley, who seconds ago had been threatening to have me arrested, stumbled backward, knocking over a pedestal table. His face went from purple to chalk white. What? What is this? He stammered, holding his hands up, palms open. I didn't move. I stood in the center of the chaos, barefoot in my boots, watching the Red Sea part. And then he walked in. Secretary of State Thomas J. Preston stepped through the doorway. He looked exactly like he did on CNN, only realer. He was 62 with silver hair and the kind of gravitas that you can't buy no matter how rich you are. His suit jacket was dusty from the explosion on the highway, and his tie was askew, but his presence was undeniable. He carried the weight of the United States government in his stride. The room went silent. A vacuum-sealed silence. Gerald Whitley froze. He blinked. He squinted. He was a man who donated heavily to political campaigns. He knew faces. He knew power. He looked at the man standing in his hallway. He looked at the Secret Service detail flanking him. Mr. Secretary? Gerald whispered. The arrogance drained out of him like water from a broken dam. Gerald was holding a glass of 1998 Bordeaux in his right hand. As the realization hit his brain that the third most powerful man in America was standing in his foyer, his fingers simply stopped working. Smash. The crystal goblet hit the pristine white Persian rug. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence. The dark red wine exploded outward, staining the white wool like a fresh crime scene. Gerald didn't even look down. He couldn't take his eyes off the secretary. Secretary Thomas didn't look at Gerald. He didn't look at Kay, who was standing with her mouth open, her face a mask of confusion and horror. He didn't look at my parents, who were pressed against the wall like frightened children. He walked straight to me. He stopped 2 feet away. He looked at my Kevlar vest, my radio coil, and the sweat on my forehead. Then, in front of everyone, he reached out and placed a firm, fatherly hand on my shoulder. It was a gesture of immense respect. Cooper, the secretary said. His voice was warm, tired, but loud enough for the back row to hear. You did it again. That was a hell of a call on the extraction route. If we had stayed on the pike for 2 more minutes, well, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. Just doing the job, sir, I said, keeping my posture rigid. The safe house was the only viable option. The safe house, he chuckled, glancing around the opulent foyer. It's certainly comfortable. Better than the embassy bunker. He squeezed my shoulder one last time, a signal of camaraderie that no amount of money could buy, and turned to face the room. He locked eyes with Gerald Whitley. Gerald looked like he was about to faint. He tried to speak, but only a squeak came out. Mr. Whitley, I presume? Secretary Thomas asked, stepping forward with his hand extended. The Secret Service agents lowered their weapons slightly, but kept their eyes scanning the guests. Why, yeah. Gerald managed to choke out. Yes, Mr. Secretary. I am honored. We didn't. I must apologize for the intrusion, the secretary said, shaking Gerald's limp hand. My motorcade was ambushed on Rockville Pike. We took heavy fire. My lead vehicle was disabled. Gasps rippled through the room. Ambush. Heavy fire. These were words from the news, not words for a Chevy Chase cocktail party. It was a critical situation, the secretary continued, his voice smooth and diplomatic. Fortunately, my lead security element took decisive action. She commandeered your residence as a temporary hardened location until the support team arrives. He turned back and gestured to me with an open palm. You should be incredibly proud, Mr. Whitley, the secretary said, smiling at the room. I was told this is your daughter-in-law's sister. It is rare to see such instinct in the field. He looked at my parents. My father was leaning against the wall, his face gray. My mother was staring at the gun on my hip as if it were a venomous snake. Agent Emma Cooper is one of the finest assets the Diplomatic Security Service has, the secretary announced. He wasn't just talking, he was testifying. A GS-15 senior special agent. Do you know how few people reach that rank at her age? She runs my protection detail. She coordinates logistics for nuclear summits. She is quite literally the reason I get home to my wife at night. GS-15. Senior special agent. Nuclear summits. The words hit the room like mortar shells. I watched Kay. Her eyes flicked from the secretary to me. I saw her brain trying to process the data, the delivery driver, the boxes, the logistics. Logistics, Kay whispered, the words slipping out of her mouth like a curse. Yes, logistics, the secretary nodded, hearing her. Secure logistics. The most complex kind. Cooper here moves mountains so we can do our jobs. He turned back to Gerald, who was staring at the red stain on his rug, then at me. He looked at me with new eyes. He saw the vest not as a costume but as armor. He saw the delivery truck outside not as an eyesore but as a tank. We had no idea, Gerald stammered. Emma never. She wouldn't, the secretary said, his tone sharpening just a fraction. She's a professional. Silent professionals don't brag. They just serve. He looked at me again. I owe you a drink when this is over, Cooper. Maybe something better than the water you were drinking earlier. I'll take a rain check, sir, I said. Chopper is 3 minutes out. We need to move you to the landing zone in the back garden. Lead the way, agent, he said. I looked at my family one last time. My mother was crying, not the fake social tears she used for effect. These were real tears of shock and humiliation. She realized that the rude daughter she had chased away with a cake knife had just brought the U.S. government into her living room. My father couldn't meet my gaze. He looked at the floor. Okay. Kay looked small in her shimmering silver dress, surrounded by her expensive things. She looked insignificant. Her success as a corporate lawyer felt like a child's game compared to the reality that had just walked through her door. Emma, Kay started, her voice trembling. I didn't answer. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just tapped my earpiece. Johnson, take point, I ordered. Secure the back garden. We are moving the asset. Copy that, boss, Johnson replied loud and clear. Boss. I turned my back on them. I turned my back on the spilled wine, the shocked faces, and the years of being the failure. I walked the Secretary of State through the kitchen, where I had been told to use the service entrance just an hour ago. But this time I wasn't carrying soda. I was carrying the weight of the world. And I had never felt lighter. The extraction was textbook perfect. Within 12 minutes, a secondary convoy of black SUVs had swarmed the driveway of the Whitley estate. A distinct, rhythmic thumping filled the air as a medevac helicopter loitered overhead, its searchlight cutting through the darkness of the Chevy Chase night. I stood by the open door of the lead vehicle, watching Secretary Thomas climb inside. Before the door closed, he looked back at me one last time and gave a sharp salute. Get some rest, Cooper, he said. That's an order. Yes, sir, I replied, returning the salute. The heavy door slammed shut. The convoy peeled out, tires crunching over the gravel, red and blue lights reflecting off the terrified faces of the neighbors who had gathered at their windows. And then silence returned. It wasn't the polite, murmuring silence of a cocktail party. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a courtroom after a guilty verdict has been read. I stood alone on the driveway, the adrenaline beginning to drain from my system, leaving behind a cold, crystal-clear clarity. I turned around. They were all standing there by the front steps. My parents, Kay, Gerald, and Patricia. They looked like statues in a museum of regrets. Gerald Whitley was the first to move. The bluster, the arrogance, the booming voice of the patriarch, it was all gone. In its place was the trembling anxiety of a man who realized he had just threatened a federal officer with arrest in front of her boss. He walked toward me, his hands clasped together as if in prayer. He didn't look at my face. He looked at the badge on my belt. Miss Cooper. Madam, Gerald stammered. He actually used the word madam. I want to offer my sincerest apologies. Truly, there was a terrible misunderstanding tonight. He reached out a hand, then pulled it back, unsure if he was allowed to touch me. We had no idea of your position, he continued, wiping sweat from his forehead with a silk handkerchief. If we had known, obviously the hospitality would have been different. I hope you won't hold my earlier outbursts against the family. It was just the stress of the evening. I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes. Fear of audits, fear of political fallout, fear of losing his social standing. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Mr. Whitley, I said. My voice was quiet, calm, and utterly indifferent. It was a revelation. Please, he begged, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace. Let's go inside. Let's open a bottle of the good vintage. Patricia can have the chef prepare something. We should celebrate your heroism. I didn't answer him. I looked past him to my parents. My mother was dabbing her eyes with a cocktail napkin. My father was staring at his shoes, unable to lift his head. Why didn't you say anything? My mother choked out, her voice shrill with accusation and embarrassment. Emma, why? We thought you were struggling. We sent you coupons. We worried about you. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading for me to accept her narrative, to accept that her cruelty was actually misguided love. We just wanted you to be safe, she sobbed. We thought you were driving a truck because you had no other options. Why let us believe that? I felt a ghost of a smile touch my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile you give when you finally solve a puzzle that has plagued you for years. You didn't think, Mom, I said. You chose. She blinked, confused. You chose to believe the lie, I said, stepping closer to her. The Kevlar vest felt like a shield against her emotional manipulation. Because believing I was a failure was easier for you. It was comfortable. If I am the failure, then Kay is the star. If I am the charity case, then you get to be the benevolent parents. I gestured to the house, to the party, to the life they had built on appearances. The truth, that I am successful, that I am powerful, that I don't need you, that truth was inconvenient for your narrative, I said. So you ignored the signs. You ignored the reality. You wanted a delivery driver, so you made me one. My father looked up then. His eyes were red. Emma, we are your parents. Biologically, yes, I nodded. But tonight you made it very clear that I am also a disgrace and unmannered. I believe those were your words, Dad. He flinched as if I had slapped him. Finally, I turned to Kay. She was standing slightly behind Gerald, her silver dress looking wrinkled, her makeup smudged. The golden child had lost her shine. She looked at me with a mixture of jealousy and fear. For the first time in her life, she was the small one. You ruined my engagement party, Kay whispered petulantly. No, Kay, I said softly. I saved your engagement party from being a crime scene. But honestly, I don't care. I looked at the ring on her finger, a big, heavy diamond paid for by a man who was currently terrified of her sister. Congratulations on the engagement, I said. I really hope your fiancé loves the truth more than he loves the fiction you spin. Because eventually, the stories we tell about ourselves fall apart. I turned away. Emma, wait. My mother called out. Where are you going? Stay. We can fix this. I didn't stop. I walked to my truck. The Ford F-150 sat there, rumbling quietly, a beast among the luxury sedans. It was scarred, dusty, and utilitarian. It was exactly like me. I climbed into the driver's seat. The leather was cool. The cab smelled of safety. I pulled my phone out to set the GPS ding. A notification slid down the screen. Bank of America. Direct deposit received. USDP of state. Treasury amount, $15,000. Memo, hazard pay 1 case code red bonus. I stared at the number. $15,000 for 30 minutes of work. More than Kay made in 2 months of filing briefs. More than the value of all the coupons my mother had ever clipped in her life. I didn't feel arrogant. I didn't feel the need to run back inside and show them the screen. The validation didn't come from them anymore. It came from the work. It came from the mission. It came from me. I connected my phone to the Bluetooth speakers. I scrolled through my playlist until I found the only song that fit the moment. The opening piano chords of Frank Sinatra's My Way filled the cabin. And now the end is near, and so I faced the final curtain. I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. I saw them standing there, a huddled group of people shrinking in the distance, trapped in their golden cage of expectations and lies. I put the truck in gear. I've lived a life that's full. I traveled each and every highway. I pressed the gas. The truck surged forward, leaving the Whitley estate behind. I drove through the open gate, past the oak trees and turned onto the main road. The highway stretched out before me, empty and dark, illuminated only by my headlights. But in the distance, on the horizon, the faintest hint of dawn was breaking. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I wasn't the sister. I wasn't the delivery girl. I rolled down the window, letting the cold wind hit my face, washing away the scent of stale perfume and old regrets. I was Agent Emma Cooper and I had a long drive ahead. I did it my way. If there's one truth I want you to take from my story, it is this. You cannot force people to respect you, especially when their disrespect serves their own ego. For years, I tried to shrink myself to fit into my family's small box. But I learned that a diamond doesn't stop having value just because it's hidden in the dark. The most expensive currency you can ever pay is your own peace of mind just to make others comfortable. Stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Your worth is not defined by their validation. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply walk away and succeed in silence. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever felt like you had to choose between your family's expectations and your own truth? Tell me what you think, I really want to know.